The vast majority of crypto artists that I know aren't seeking validation. It's going to become a bigger thing eventually over time, but I don't foresee it picking up in a huge way again anytime soon. And I also kind of don't want it to. I want it to just become a normal thing that people do.
On this episode of The Collector's Call, we host Defiant Squid, a crypto artist and animator whose practice fuses memory, abstraction, and the pixelated spirit of early video games. With a focus on nostalgia and geometry, his work transforms digital landscapes into textured forms that feel both experimental and familiar. We talk about his journey from animation to crypto art, his explorations of light and fragmentation, and the ways he navigates between digital and physical mediums. Let's dive into this conversation.
Well, hello, Defiant Squid, and thank you so much for joining us today for another interview on crypto art and your practice. We're delighted to have you. Let's start easy. What does crypto art mean to you?
Oh, that's immediately in the deep end. Yeah, thanks for having me, first of all. I got into crypto in 2020, and crypto art to me initially was all about, well, artist royalties, automatic, lots of redundancies to make sure artists were getting exactly what they needed, wanted, and then programmable art. So I started with Async Art, thinking about these sort of magic Photoshop files, as I called them at the time, ways of really leveraging the digital in ways that other art can't. I have to admit, I've never really been someone who creates the kind of crypto art that you see that is very like self-referential and meta. I enjoy it. I've collected it. I'm less involved in the sort of crypto side, if that makes sense. More art focused. I'm kind of bring my practice in without like logos and stuff like that. I've done it and it didn't necessarily sit right to me, but I think maybe that's because I do more abstract stuff. So it's a bit too figurative for me.
I think as we have learned through these conversations, crypto art means very different things to different people. Yeah. So many would say that, having the crypto iconography does not necessarily mean that it is crypto art. And your art, I guess, shows us that exactly. You have said, Defiant Squid, that you were comforted by a faded Monet print in your grandparents' house growing up. So can you tell us about those early experiences with art and how you got started in your creative journey?
Yeah, that's a good callback. So it was, I think it's poppies? I think poppies in a field. And I can't now remember the exact name, but I can remember the image vividly, partly because I saw it every time I went to visit my grandparents growing up as a child. But also, again, I had a friend, I think in college. I remember seeing it in their kitchen, but they had, I would imagine, a much more recent print of it. So it was really interesting to see. And yeah, you said faded, like it was really interesting at the time to see the difference between one that was probably older than me, to be honest, on the wall, colors sort of completely different to what they might have been originally. And I think that kind of thing happened to me quite a lot. I mean, I don't know if you can see it, but I've got the Wham cushion down there. And that was a gift from a friend. I got into Liechtenstein and pop art sort of quite early in school. And then actually seeing it in person was a really interesting experience. So I've got kind of I would say, diverse, broad, if not particularly deep knowledge of art history and sort of love for all different kinds. So when it came to sort of creating my own things, these were really good reference points for not necessarily the content of the art, but like the process behind them, why they were created. And these artists are so well documented that it was really easy to find that information. I think I rely a little bit less on that now because I'm a bit more experienced, but especially when I was growing up and doing, like when I was working initially, trying to figure out in college what I wanted to do with my art career, it was really nice to have this, at that point, entire lifetime of art history that I'd seen in friends' house and families' houses. Being exposed to it was really valuable, I think.
And your name is it stands out, Defiant Squid. And when going through your art, you can see it as a recurring theme in works like The Hunt or The Journey. I also saw some older sketches that you have of the animal. What does this figure signify to you and to your art?
So Defiant Squid comes from originally, I'll go all the way back to the beginning. In university, I had some friends. One was a writer, one was a musician. And we used to enjoy these little creative exercises where we would come up with a fake band or a fake film studio, and we'd come up with different names, titles, album titles, singles, films, that kind of thing. And the Defiant Squid ended up being, initially, it was an album title for a fake band that we made, I think. So it was called The Patch Stand. and the album title was The Defiant Squid. I don't remember exactly. I think my friend came up with a name and I came up with the imagery, which would have made sense. And it was started life literally just as a giant squid attacking a submarine. And it was very angry and it was a bit pissed off that this submarine had come into its territory and all that kind of thing. So that's like the actual like bare bones. I experimented a little bit with like writing some lore behind it. But as I've explored it, all that's happened is the squid itself has got older, bigger, more dangerous. So that's it. It's not. So I've got the journey and the hunt, and now it's in space. So it's not actually a earthbound squid. It flies through space and it's magic, and it goes through dimensions and all that kind of stuff. I did explore one where it was in a big space battle, but I never got around to actually making that. So I think that might come back at some point. So when I got into crypto art, and I thought it'd be nice to have a name, like a pseudonym kind of thing.
I don't know why when you were talking about all the places a squid has been, I had to think about Dr. Seuss, All the Places You Will Go. So maybe there is all the places the squid will go. So, there's a story maybe there. And what kind of music would this fake band be playing if Defiant Squid was real?
That is a good question. So at the time we were listening to, I would say, a lot of Block Party. It would have been sort of 2010s indie rock. But I don't know if that's actually what the band would have played. Because we did a part of this sort of exercise was creating different albums for different genres and different times of their career and stuff like that. So one of them was literally just called The Sad Album. And the imagery was raindrops on glass and stuff like that. So we would come up with all these ideas. I would illustrate them. I don't think we ever actually made any music. I think the idea was that it was always a fake band. But we were definitely listening to a lot of pop rock, synth stuff at the time. So if they did, it would probably be something like that.
A fake band that gave rise to a very real artist and identity around that Defiant Squid character.
It worked out well, I think, yeah.
It did indeed. You mentioned that your entry into the world of crypto art began back in 2020 when you stumbled upon the Async Art platform. What was so compelling about Async at that time?
Oh, good question. So I had already been making some abstract pixel art paintings for a few years at that point. So I'm a freelance animator professionally, and I did that in 2016. And I thought I need something to take up my time creatively without being sort of restricted by budgets and clients and that kind of thing. So I started doing digital painting and got into painting squares, basically. It was a very meditative process. When I discovered Async Art, so I'm big into video games, play a lot of video games. I like the community aspect. So it was a way of combining those two things. For example, one of my pieces on Async, one of the earliest ones, it was a hexagonal board of color. And the idea that individual people could own different tiles and then change the color and the interactivity, that was almost certainly the main reason. The second one that I made, it was like a Polaroid that could change and fade over time. So it was those kind of things, the interactivity, the community element, and also things changing over time. For me, that was completely new, really novel concept, but also from my professional experience, I use layers all the time in creating commercial work. So it was really easy for me to jump in and just think of ideas that would use those layer systems and stuff like that.
What kind of commercial work do you do outside of your artistic practice?
So I work on mostly 2D motion design work and character animation. I generally, especially recently in the last few years, I've worked a lot with charities, which is really nice. I won't give you the whole sales pitch here, but I'm trying to think of all the things that I would say if I was. But yeah, I do a bit of 3D work and stuff as well. A lot of it can be boiled down into like explainer videos. That word has sort of got a bit of a stigma, at least in the animation industry, I think. But they do a really good job for what they do. So it's advertising or it's training or it's for charity work and things like that. It's good. I still really enjoy it. I've been doing it nearly 10 years. I don't have any plan to stop. But I realized very early on that it couldn't be my entire creative practice. I had to do something that I wanted to do.
Well, it's nice that you get to hone some of those skills. I know sometimes there's that craft versus art distinction, but when you can exercise part of it in a professional capacity, it helps with income, which balances out the ability to make art, but also allows you to continue to develop yourself. And sometimes being forced to use those skills in a non-art focused way can be a benefit, I'd imagine.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think especially when it comes to animation, I've started out, I think, focusing digital painting and programmable art, but then I thought I might as well use my animation experience. Even things that would seem quite simple, like perfectly looping GIFs. If you've never done that before, there's a whole bunch of hurdles. So having been able to sort of knock these pieces out without stressing too much, I think it really helped. And especially when it comes to things like 3D, learning new skills. I can learn a new skill personally, like in my own practice, or I can learn a new skill professionally. And then it's been really helpful. And the fact that I'm self-employed, like exactly like you said, the balance. I consider myself full-time employed, but I block out Wednesdays, generally speaking, for art, which has been really helpful in terms of just making sure I carve out that time to do both.
Oh, that's exciting. That's wonderful to hear. You describe your art frequently as nostalgic and geometric. How do those terms come together in your practice?
Well, that's tricky. I mean, I use them kind of almost as a cop-out, so I don't have to explain it. So I'll do nostalgia first. So the nostalgia comes from, I think, as I mentioned, the gaming. So I play a lot of video games, and I have done since I was very little. I think I was quite lucky to have quite early access to not anything particularly new, but just we had a Sega Master System, I think when I was about 4 years old or something like that. My dad built his own PC when I was maybe 7 or 8, I don't know. And I kind of got hooked like almost immediately. I'm really interested in the creation of video games as well, like the art behind it and the technical process. But I play a lot of old games now. So I still play some of the games that I played growing up, which is kind of where the pixel art comes in, and also a bit of low poly stuff. So that's kind of the nostalgia thing. I mentioned the Polaroid before. I made that one around the time that my granddad passed away, and I was thinking about him a lot, and just, like memories and where they go. Because I don't think memories necessarily disappear a lot of the time. At least for me, I will be doing something completely random, and then a memory of someone that I know or someone that I used to know 10, 15 years ago will just sort of pop up in my head. So I was thinking a lot about that. And that really helped, I think, with making that piece. Rather than it just fading over time and being a little bit depressing, it actually, you can swap it back, and you can bring the resolution back and make it crisp and things like that. So that ties into the whole nostalgia thing. I'm always thinking about memory, partly because mine is terrible. And the geometry side of it is squares, cubes, hexagons, really. So again, kind of the gaming side to a certain extent, but I also really like Mondrian, clay, anyone that's used squares or big, broad shapes in their artwork. I love little details, but I love a bigger picture. I mean, that applies to even things like Van Gogh, where you get a completely different experience. You're looking at it up close and seeing the actual sort of physical brushstrokes, and as the whole picture comes together as you see it across the room. So maybe resolution would be a more accurate way of looking at it, because it's not just about squares and pixels. It is about how these things kind of blend together, I guess. But hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, and you have admitted that you're obsessed with bringing that painterly feel into your works, and that you will spend lots of time testing different brushes to get that painterly feel. What draws you to that tactile quality in the digital medium?
Oh, good question. I'm going to say guilt, but that's not true. I say that because I haven't done any physical painting for a long time. I've got canvases in my cupboard, which are maybe 15 years old, that I bought as a student and was always planning to use. So there is a certain element of knowing that I haven't done anything like that, and I'm experienced. I mean, I make my own birthday cards and stuff like that. I use pens and crayons, and like I do loads of things like that kind of keep me going from a physical tools point of view. But part of it is how easy it is now to, I mean, like you said, I spent a lot of time testing, but with Procreate and other tools, it's never going to be exactly the same, but you can very, very closely recreate certain aspects of physical tools, color blending, and it's the little mistakes that I like as well. So I think my pixel art style has got looser over time, because I really enjoy the idea that I could make a print of it and someone would look at it and think that it was, I'm always thinking about what would someone think of this if they saw it for the first time without knowing anything about me. And obviously a lot of that depends on context, but I call myself a digital artist because I enjoy that title. I enjoy everything that comes with that. But at the same time, it's nice for the digital element to kind of take a step back and disappear behind the actual artwork that I've made, if that makes sense. But yes, the little mistakes, especially. One of my favorite things to do, I'll work on a grid. No question about like whether I'm doing these things manually or not. I'm using a grid because I like straight lines, but I will, at least in Procreate, I will make the grid as chunky as possible so that I can't actually see behind it. I'm not following a line. I'm just like, oh, there's a line here. I'll just go like that. and then bits spill over. I really enjoy just things spilling over into different areas and the little things that creates. I put a lot of minute detail and intent into like a lot of what I do, but I also need that extra bit of, I'm not sure how this is going to turn out. And that's one way of doing it. I think is one reason why I've kind of shied away from what you might call pure pixel art, which I love looking at and experiencing, especially when it comes to games, but I don't make pixel art. I wouldn't say that to a pixel artist that we do the same thing, if that makes sense.
Preparing for this interview, I saw a couple of whips that you have posted. And like you said, perspective really plays a lot into the art because you had some close-ups. And unless you saw the reflection on the screen, you would have to, do a double take to see, is it digital or was it painted by hand? So you're definitely achieving what you say you want to achieve.
Good to know. Thank you.
You have said that no amount of digital art could make physical art obsolete. What interests you in exploring both of these mediums in your practice?
Yeah, obsolescence is something that comes up a lot in the same way that photography never got rid of illustration, in the same way that AI is not going to get rid of a lot of the things that we do. There is a point where I think something moves from maybe a mainstream commercial process to a craft. I mean, my wife, for example, weaves willow baskets and she's amazing at it, but she works in tech. She does an incredibly creative technical job and then goes and does this super impressive thing with her hands. So I think it's that kind of mindset where no amount of Procreate, for example, is going to replace watercolors or oils. And I'm also very aware that I really enjoy going to galleries. I love going to exhibitions where there's screens everywhere. I've got a screen so I can show animation up there. But going to a museum or a gallery or an exhibition where it's print work or sketches and things like that. So yeah, I'll just try and be a bit, empathetic to people who commit fully to one thing, potentially knowing full well that it's not necessarily going to be valuable to someone else in the long term, if that makes sense. I'm aware that digital art means a lot to a lot of people, but it's still not treated in the same way as physical art, at least at this stage.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be an either or conversation. It can be both.
Yeah.
And there's lots of different ways to enjoy and experience and create.
You should have answered that question. That was way better than mine.
I wanted to come back to something you started to discuss. I think it's RYB, your first programmable art that you released on Async. It's a very thoughtful work. It explores themes related to the durability of art on the blockchain, also perhaps our own longevity. What else can you tell us about the idea behind that work and what you wanted to explore with it?
Yeah. So I might have spoiled this one already, talking about my granddad and things, but I can give you a bit more info. So the RYB, and technically it could be RYBW. So the idea being that the primary colors, RGB is a kind of, sort of shorthand for digital color. And I wanted to play on how all of those things work. I sort of made an abstract painting individually for each color, kind of just using these primary values, and then crunched them down to different pixel levels and depths to sort of show the resolution changing and reducing. But then also I added another layer on the top, which is a kind of a fade layer. So all these processes are kind of happening individually, but the idea being that the owner of the piece could change them as they wanted. But I think the top layer ended up being bright green, but because it's set to a certain blend mode, it affects all of the layers all the way down. So it kind of desaturates, I think. That's kind of how it actually came together. Part of it comes from a day at the beach. So you have red, the sun, blue, the sea, and the yellow, the sand. And I was thinking about my granddad, but also my family as a whole. And I used to live near the coast, nearish. We used to spend a lot of time on the beach as a family. So that definitely bled into that piece where I was thinking about these very, very specific days that I had and experiences I had on the beach. And from what I remember, I think each color ended up being like a different day. I focused on something different about it. But that's like the very sort of deep level of where that came from. And I can kind of sum it up as it's different colors overlaid in a kind of Polaroid fashion. Yeah, hopefully that answers that.
That does. It's a very thoughtful work, and thank you for describing some of the background to it. It's always interesting because there's a lot of discussion in the tokenized art space around the permanence of the blockchain, and some of this gets into the on-chain art discussion. But often what's missed is the value of what might actually be preserved and whether that's worthwhile? And in fact, is the art element of it the most important? Maybe we should be, pinning pictures of family and others on chain, and that's where the best use case would be for our own personal sense of nostalgia and memory.
Yeah, I'm not sure what state it's in currently, unfortunately, since Async shut down. I'm not sure.
Yeah, a painful change. And I think we're all hoping that something will come along, or someone maybe, to find a way to enable some of what was there, or create a new type of platform that allows similar types of experiences. As you mentioned, the beauty of that space was really the participative elements, the community ones that felt similar to some of the gaming environment that you have grown up within.
Yeah, I won't go into it too much, but I think for me personally, the biggest loss of Async was the dynamic blueprints that they sort of put together right at the end, because I know a number of other people had planned bigger long form pieces to sort of keep the ball rolling and have these artworks not just be sort of minted and left there, but actually constantly interacted with. And the comment features and all the different things that they added to the platform really made that sort of possible.
Hopefully something will return to allow us to see part of that vision that you and others had planned for the future. I wanted to ask about Super Effective. That's a collection of works that depict, I guess we might call them crypto art themes, through simple icon-based imagery and text. It feels a lot like looking at a little Tamagotchi screen when I look at these works. What did you want to explore with this series?
Yeah, you caught me out on that one, because that was one of the few I think that has any kind of crypto iconography in. So the idea with that one, I've got a tiny little Game Boy thing, and it plays old games. And there was a point where I realized I never owned a Game Boy. I always had like Sega stuff growing up. And I started playing the first game, and it is excellent for how old it is, for the limitations of the time. I really enjoyed it, and I binged all the way through, really. So I ended up with this idea of, I was seeing the battle screen quite a lot. So that's kind of where that initial idea came from. You've got this foreground element and a background element, and the text sort of top and bottom, and the whole super effective thing. So if you have a fire and a water move, connecting a web of different statuses and creatures and types. So that's kind of where the initial idea came from. And then I thought, how can I apply this to what I'm doing at the moment, crypto art and things like that? So it eventually became a process of just whittling down these different things that might be super effective, that might be not very effective, things that might work or not work. And I ended up sort of settling on this kind of very loose story. So it doesn't really follow in an exact pattern, but it's sort of be inspired by something, create something, try and sell it. You can't sell it because everything's crashing. It was, all the kind of main sort of prongs of crypto art, I guess. I think the original versions had a lot more color, but I settled eventually on really reducing that palette, and then just sort of giving a subtle color to each one to make them kind of stand out a little bit as well. And part of it was an exercise in text. So I don't really use that much text in my work, but I really love pixelated text. So it was a kind of a test to see how I could make that text readable, but not overly sort of dense pixel resolution. So yeah, it's quite fun to do.
They're a lot of fun to look at, and the text makes them very playful. I really like the ideas. One artist is all out of ideas, and then a wide cliche appears, and that feels quite succinct in terms of what I imagine many creators feel in this space, but then also some of the audience and collectors experience too of, that looks a bit...
Hopefully that's a universal thing, yeah.
Defiant, Restart in MS-DOS mode is a recent series of digital pixel paintings that harken back to the 1990s computer color schemes. What was the motivation behind the series?
Oh, nice. Okay, so this one is quite recent, and it's actually unfinished. I've got about 3 of them left to do, which I've started. This kind of ties into all of the other stuff that I said, the whole like retro video games thing. I play a lot of computer games. I still play old games now. And I was kind of fascinated by things like Doom and Quake, kind of the more like iconic ones. And I feel like a lot of what I do, and I don't really talk about it too much, is about distilling quite complex things into a low resolution. And this was that, essentially. It was taking all my years of playing these games, enjoying them. Some I'd never played before. So I wrote a list and I made the effort to like play some of the ones that I'd not played. And then, sort of breaking them all down into sort of individual images. And I don't know if I've shared any of the behind the scenes of these ones, but taking screenshots of the game kind of while I was in it, and taking screenshots from Google and stuff like that. And then just picking and choosing colors from various screenshots, forming my own composition where Some, but not all of them are from a first person perspective. So you have maybe an interface at the bottom, or you have like a hand pointing forward, usually holding a gun or something. So I wanted to avoid making them look really obvious what they were, but also maybe the idea being I like putting little things in where someone that's played one of those games will recognize it. That's the fun for me, I think, is figuring out how much detail to include here, how much to strip away, what to title it, for example, because some of them are titled based on voice lines from the games. And I've done this before with previous work where I've used voice lines from video games to title certain pieces, because it's kind of an elegant way to get what I want out of a piece and make it really nostalgic for me, but actually make use of someone else's excellent writing, if that makes sense, to make it more abstract, because some of them are just nonsensical out of context, which is quite nice. And again, I don't know if this sort of counts as nostalgia, but to go back to what I was doing more of in 2021, 22, simplify the process, not overdo it, not overthink it, and then just make these things. It's an excuse to do something simple and not stress about it too much, because I still really enjoy the process, just sitting in front of the TV, coloring squares. I love that. So I'm probably always going to do that. It's just finding the time to finish a project is the tricky bit.
And an excuse to play a lot of video games, it sounds like.
Yeah, I don't need one of those.
You use geometry and shadows to explore depth in your Voxel Cliffs collection. What do you enjoy about exploring 3D in a 2D medium?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes. So this kind of comes from Pokemon a little bit, because there's a sort of top-down isometric view, but I've always liked isometric things, something being absolutely consistent in shape and scale, regardless of how you view it. And I really like maps as well, and that kind of ties into that a little bit. A little bit of knowledge is dangerous, right? So I have just enough knowledge of 3D creation, animation to not know exactly how it works, but know what I want to get out of it. And part of that went into my 2D work where I was thinking, I want to do voxels, but in the same way with the pixels, I don't want to use specific blocks of color. You could argue that each pixel could be an artwork in itself. And I did toy with the idea when I was working on Async of creating a piece and then just sectioning it up into individual pixels and minting them separately and all that kind of stuff, so you could form something else later. So that's kind of where the idea for the voxel work came in the same way. I want to do voxel art, but I don't want to be limited to one single color per voxel. There are incredible voxel artists out there that do amazing things with those. But my thinking was I want to be able to paint what's called in 3D, it's called ambient occlusion. So when two surfaces meet kind of like that, there's a shadow here. That fascinates me, and I still love doing that. And I enjoy painting that as a process as well. So I'll design a landscape, figure out where all the levels are, and then go into every single little corner, kind of like the opposite of sweeping, right? I'm going in and actually putting in marks on all of these extra little corners and stuff where the shadows would be. So that's kind of where that came from. And the other part of doing voxel to give it a bit of depth. So I'm working on another one at the moment, but I've got one piece on Transient Labs called Ascension, which uses their dynamic art engine to change image. So I got the mouse cursor essentially to define which image shows. And then I layered up a bunch of images, and each one has a different blur level. So the end result being that you can move the cursor around and it looks like you're moving a camera, kind of not moving the camera up and down, but you're changing the focus. So that wouldn't really work in 2D. That's what I needed voxels for, that idea. So it kind of came from that as well. There's always a technical and a creative kind of mishmash when it comes to these things. But that's why I'm really glad that Transient exists as well.
I really like the idea of that work where everyone holds their own individual pixel and then together it makes one image. That's an exciting concept. Hopefully you can explore it further at some point.
Oh yeah, putting it together, that'd be a challenge, yeah.
Oh, that would be. In 2022, you released the book Adventures in Cryptoart. What motivated you to make a book about crypto art?
Oh, I forgot about the book. Thanks for bringing that up. So yeah, in 2022, I was very, very lucky to be in a position where I had sold a certain amount of art. My actual work was going okay. So I found myself with a little bit of extra cash that I wanted to put somewhere. And I ended up thinking, oh, I'll make an art book because it's a really good gift. I can give it to friends and family, but also I can potentially sell it as well. The experience that I had making books helped, I think, because we'd come back from a holiday and I'd taken all of my photos and I'd turned them into a nice photo book, again, as a gift for families and things like that. So having done that, having done a layout book, which is mostly pictures, a little bit of text here and there. I thought, well, I've got all this artwork. I've been working for years on this portfolio. How can I turn it into a physical thing? And then I just really enjoyed the process. It was really, really quick to do, actually. I started it. I thought this is going to take ages, but I was really lucky that a good friend of mine was working in publishing at the time. So she gave me loads and loads of good advice. It eventually got printed near where I live. So it was locally printed and we self-published it. And then wanted an excuse to do a launch as well. Like if you've made a book, you need to launch it, right? So again, very lucky, a friend of mine runs a gallery in Norwich. She gave me an evening and a free space to put up some prints, decorate everything, helped me with like promoting it on social media and everything like that. So yeah, it was really an excuse to get a physical, and I love an art book. I love a chunky art book, right? You need to look for, and my publisher said I've got expensive taste, so I maybe spent a bit too much money on it. But I think once I've sold all of them, I'll be in profit a little bit. So I just have to get rid of all of them.
Well, somehow we didn't realize that you had these with you at the NFC conference, or it would have been a coveted collectible to track down. But hopefully there's another opportunity to get our hands on one. The book pairs your artwork with some personal reflections. What kinds of ideas do you explore in it?
Good question. So there's obviously the nostalgia and the geometry and things like that. I tried to make it funny and silly. I wanted it to be like, oh, here's all my masterpieces in a collection, because it was my first book. It was always going to be like hopefully a gateway into just the kind of work that I do. I do explain a little bit in there sort of how all of these things came about. And then there's a little bit about NFTs in there. I wanted to make sure that it was accessible to anyone. I mean, it's called Adventures in Cryptoart, so hopefully it's obvious where I'm coming from to people in the space. But it also needs to be sort of accessible. Like I gave one to my gran. She understands it to a certain extent, but I wasn't going to go in deep with royalties and on-chain minting and all that kind of stuff. There was one project that I did where I did a weekly painting. So I did one abstract painting every week for 2021. So that was the year leading up to making the book. So I wrote a little bit about that and why it was insane to do, but why I actually really enjoyed the process. So yeah, each project has got a little bit in here and there. I didn't actually say too much about the Defiant Squid, so maybe I should have done. Maybe that'll go in the next one. More of a biography.
So you already have the bones for the next one. It's just a matter of getting to do it.
Yes.
You're a part of the Cult of Cryptoart, a loose-knit group of crypto artists and those who support them. What is significant for you to be part of this group of people?
What isn't significant? I mean, it's a group of close friends. It's been excellent for all of us hyping each other up and representing each other and bringing loads of like-minded people together. It's been absolutely wild to see like the logo on the sponsor board for Lisbon and other events. Everyone in that group is like a close friend and peer, I guess. And we talk all the time. Like there's various different groups and things like that. So I've met friends for life in there. The difference between that and friends I have maybe from school or college or sort of my IRL life is we talk about art all the time. And I didn't realize how much I needed that until kind of joining crypto space. I've never really been that good at sort of integrating myself into the art world proper, like the IRL art world. Whereas now I feel like I've got a lot more confidence talking about what I do, why I do what I do, and the work that I like and don't like because of these people, because they have really helped. So the volume and quality of shared experience there is absolutely massive for someone like me. What the cult has done has very organically given me a group of people that I can talk to very honestly, which has been really nice. But yeah, being part of the group shows and stuff like that, like I didn't know how to set up a show, how to do my own work. I've got professional experience in an animation kind of almost broadcasting aspect. So I can do all of that. That's easy. When it comes to putting on your own show, I've reached out to so many people to be like, what do I need to do? Tell me, where do I start? How much is it going to cost? All that kind of stuff. And I think I'm very lucky to be part of it because it's a significant group of people in the space as well. I know we're all in our own little bubbles, but I feel like the cult gives all of us kind of an anchor, which is really nice because we're all shouting into the void on Twitter a lot of the time, whereas the cult is a bit more of a community. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels a bit like home. I said you can always go back to and you can rely on all of its members. So yeah, it's family for sure. What artworks do you feel are essential to the story of crypto art?
Oh, other people's artworks, not mine.
It is up to you. You can decide how to answer that.
That's a really hard question. I feel like there's some really obvious ones from I don't want to say mainstream perspective, but you've got things like people's everydays, and you've got grifters, ones that are kind of wildly popular, I think for good reason. I would say anything that Angie Taylor has done. I'm going to stop there because otherwise I'll just list off names of my friends. But really, I don't think I'm going to be able to answer that. In terms of actual individual artworks, this is part of the potential problem with Beeple's everydays and other huge sales like Pack and other artists that were kind of huge a couple of years ago. It's very easy for those to be held up as like the only example to a wider audience, whereas those of us kind of that are in the space sort of daily will enjoy that artwork, but it's not necessarily representative of what we do. Felix is probably one that I would say epitomizes a lot of crypto art, both in terms of the style, the presentation, but also the content. So there's a lot of crypto elements in there, charts, and I really enjoy what he does. Yeah, no, I'll stop there. Otherwise, I'll just name a bunch of my friends.
It's always an interesting exercise. So thanks for indulging us a bit with that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the current state of crypto art, tokenized art, and where you think things go from here.
That is also a really tricky question, but I will try to answer this one. I feel like we are in, I would say, a bit of a lull in the sense that we're still kind of clawing back a certain amount of reputation from like 2021-ish. So people that aren't in the space, generally speaking, if I talk to them about NFTs, they're either quite dismissive or they consider it something that's quite short-lived. So the really interesting part is going to be when, and I think this is the same with AI, when a certain amount of hype dies down and then it just becomes the norm. I don't think crypto art has become the norm. If and when that happens, it's going to be really interesting. So illustrators, for example, the illustration community was, as a whole, I think, very, very dismissive of NFTs. And it's generally, I would say, a very close-knit community, especially on Twitter. I don't know what it's like now, but sort of back in 2021, they immediately took a dislike to it. A lot of them, at least the people that I know and what I saw online. Whereas people that identified themselves as digital artists kind of dove straight in. Animators were, in my experience, a mixed bag. Some people dived in, some people absolutely hated it from the off. So I don't think that's gone away. I think it's just been people got distracted by other things. First impressions were atrocious for the vast majority of people. It doesn't help that NFTs is just an awkward sum up of everything. I really like crypto art as a word, so I'm glad you that's what you asked the question about, but we are beholden to how people see NFTs. And I think until the language adapts and changes for us to be able to say we're digital artists, and the assumption is that we probably mint stuff, and it's fine if we do, like, I don't think we're going to get anywhere with the general public. But I also don't mind that, because I feel like if there are any problems, like with the public perception of NFTs and crypto art, it is because huge sales were made, loads of people jumped in, plenty of people got burned, unfortunately, and then everything crashed. And up until that point, I was feeling like it was quite organic. And I was thinking, oh, in the next 5 years, eventually we'll get to a point where you'll start getting some high profile names joining the space. And then instead we got a bunch of celebrities and influencers, and then like meme coins. And there's definitely a place for all of these things. It's just very difficult for crypto art to differentiate itself. And I don't know if I'm in the minority here, but I do think that integrating ourselves a little bit more into the art world in general might help. I know I didn't join crypto art, and I didn't get involved in cryptocurrencies from an anarchist point of view. I can definitely appreciate it. I think the vast majority of crypto artists that I know aren't seeking validation. So at some point, who cares, right? If we keep doing what we're doing, as long as the bubble that we all live in is big enough that there is money coming in and out for sales, I guess, like in terms of the space surviving. But I wouldn't mind too much if the entire crypto space sort of plummeted and then we went back to sort of selling each other artwork for a fiver. Because, I mean, that's a lot of people enjoy Tezos, so there's this whole communities around very low fee, low cost chains. Yeah, to sum up, I think it's going to become a bigger thing eventually over time, but I don't foresee it picking up in a huge way again anytime soon. And I also kind of don't want it to. I want it to just become a normal thing that people do.
What motivates you to continue to make crypto art?
Oh, God, what motivates me in general? Sales. No. I have like I was saying with the Cult and everyone else that I've met in this space, I absolutely have a responsibility to continue making art. That's one thing I have accepted and I'm fine with, and I think is a good thing. But in terms of actual motivation, I'm never going to stop making the things that I want to make. crypto art and NFTs and certain blockchain technologies, let's say, allow me to take the work that I've made, show it online in a way that I'm fully confident that even though it's a JPEG and can be infinitely copied, it may have value to someone at some point in the future. I still really, truly believe in default automatic royalties. So anything that I've minted and sold, for example, in 2020, if that then gets sold again, then if I make a little bit of money out of that and that can support my career, that's always going to be one of the reasons to mint it. But also the community aspect, right? I still collect work now, and I've been really lucky to be able to say that of my initial investment, I have been able to sell just like enough work to collect artwork from friends and earn a little bit of a living out of it. So that's part of the motivation as well, is knowing that I want to be able to collect my own artwork. My art collection is very small, I think, relative to a lot of other people in the space. But I absolutely love all of the pieces that I've collected, and I don't collect anything that I don't want to, aside from the odd crypto kitty and things like that. In terms of motivation, I'm always going to make the art, so I might as well do something with it and find like-minded people. And I think the technology is really like the reason we know each other and the reason these communities have popped up, because of the technology behind all these things. I still truly think that it's novel and valuable and interesting. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on how that goes as well. So that's part of it.
Yeah, the technology led you into this space and continues to offer some of the most promise to distribute this medium around the world.
Definitely. Yeah.
Defiant Squid, it has been a pleasure speaking with you today. Your work blends nostalgia, geometry, and pixels in a way that captures both playfulness and permanence. Thank you for joining us today to share your story.
Thanks so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. I appreciate it.
The story of crypto art is still being written. Thanks for joining us as we talk to those at the heart of this movement.